Hello and welcome to Firstpost Spotlight, where we bring you stories that matter to you from all across the world. From breaking news to the day's biggest controversies, we shed light on issues that shape our world. I'm Alison LaGrange, live from Durban, South Africa. Let's begin with the top headlines. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio asks NATO to commit to spending 5% of GDP on defense, while dismissing hysteria questioning President Donald Trump's commitment to the alliance. Elon Musk's stint at the Trump administration's Department of Government Efficiency is reportedly set to end soon, as a strict 130-day cap on his service expires next month. Hungary withdraws from the International Criminal Court as its Prime Minister Viktor Orban welcomes Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who faces an ICC arrest warrant. South Africa's unity government fractures as the Democratic Alliance considers its future in the alliance after Parliament passed a budget that it rejected. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi receives a rousing welcome and a guard of honor in Bangkok as he visits Thailand for the 6th BIMSTEC summit. Hello and welcome. We begin with the unprecedented development from Washington, D.C., where US President Donald Trump unveiled his much-anticipated global trade tariffs. Declaring what Trump called America's economic independence from the country's friends and foes, the president hit against alleged exploitation of the country's industries. He said America had been looted, pillaged, raped, and plundered by nations near and far.
Hello, Americans. This is Liberation Day. Waiting for a long time. Going to make it wealthy, good and wealthy. For decades, our country has been looted, pillaged, raped, and plundered by nations near and far, both friend and foe alike. In a few moments, I will sign a historic executive order instituting reciprocal tariffs on countries throughout the world. Reciprocal.
Announcing the reciprocal tariffs, the US president said he was imposing only half the tariffs which the top US trade partners levy on Washington's exports. The reciprocal discounted tariffs went far beyond what many economists had expected. Now, Chinese exports to the United States were the worst hit, with Trump slapping a whopping 54% total tariffs on China. Vietnam, the Southeast Asian economic power spot, has also been hit with a whopping 46% US tariffs. Trump, like he had long promised, pulled the tariff trigger on American allies and partners as well. Among them, Taiwan has been hit with 32% tariffs. Indian exports to the US have been hit with 27% tariffs. South Korean exports will face 26% tariffs, followed by Japan with 24%. While the 27-nation European Union has been hit with 20% tariffs. Trump also announced the implementation of a 25% tariffs on the US automobile imports. While the US president claimed that this move will spur auto manufacturing within the country, analysts say it will shoot up new car prices. The 25% duty applies to all cars assembled outside the US and will cover more than $460 billion worth of US vehicle and vehicle parts imports. The automobile tariffs go into effect immediately. Additionally, the 25% tariff will also apply to imported auto parts, adding to the cost of cars assembled within the US, as well as auto repairs. The tariffs on auto parts will go into effect starting the 3rd of May. The Trump administration has exempted cars and automobile parts imported from Mexico and Canada from these tariffs. But despite that, the move is set to raise car prices in the United States, as most cars rolling on the US roads contain components made abroad. President Trump also unveiled what he called a baseline tariff, which is the minimum tariff imposed on all US trade partners. This minimum baseline tariff has been set at 10% and will go into effect starting the 5th of April. Some countries, identified by the experts as Russia, Iran, and North Korea, won't be under the purview of this 10% baseline tariffs, and that's because they are already under a heavy volley of US sanctions for allegedly driving various conflicts around the world.
At the same time, we will establish a minimum baseline tariff of 10%. You notice that on the chart? And that'll be on other countries to help rebuild our economy and to prevent cheating.
The tariff announcement has sent unprecedented ripples through the markets worldwide as stocks tumble due to bigger-than-expected Trump tariffs. With a sea of red in the global markets, the U.S. index of S&P 500 futures slumped over 3%. Asian markets also fell sharply, with benchmark indices in Japan, Hong Kong, South Korea, and India recording sharp declines. Meanwhile, gold prices hit a record high of $3,161 as investors sought safe investments amid declining stock market futures. U.S. President Trump blamed his predecessor Joe Biden's policies for creating conditions due to which he has been forced to levy the tariffs. Now, Trump also praised Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and late Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. But keeping his mutual sense of respect for these leaders aside, the U.S. president went on to announce tariffs on both Indian and Japanese imports.
Such horrendous imbalances have devastated our industrial base and put our national security at risk. I don't blame these other countries at all for this calamity. I blame former presidents and past leaders who weren't doing their job. They let it happen, and they let it happen to an extent that nobody can even believe.
Trump's tariff announcement has sent massive ripples through the global economy, while inciting calls for retaliation from wealthy European nations. But the developing world and the global south seems to be set to tread a cautious path of negotiations with the Trump administration. The full impact of these measures on the global scene will be realized in the days to come, and we will keep you updated on all of that. And staying on with Trump's tariffs, let's shift our focus to the impact on India. In a move that he termed Liberation Day, Trump declared a 27% tariff on Indian imports, citing what he called a discounted reciprocal approach. U.S. President Trump explained that this new tariff rate was calculated based on the cumulative tariffs and non-monetary barriers imposed by other nations on U.S. products. He specifically stated that India levies a 52% tariff on U.S. imports, thus justifying the 27% reciprocal tariff. While announcing tariffs on Indian goods, Trump also talked about his relationship with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Trump called Prime Minister Modi a great friend.
India, very, very tough, very, very tough. The Prime Minister just left, and he's a great friend of mine, but I said, you're a friend of mine, but you're not treating us right. They charge us 52%. You have to understand, we charge them almost nothing for years and years and decades.
So we pronounce.
The administration has, however, exempted pharmaceutical exports from the tariff, bringing cheer to India's pharma industry. The U.S. accounted for nearly a third of India's pharmaceutical exports, mainly cheaper versions of popular drugs, with sales of about $9 billion last fiscal year. Following Trump's tariff announcement, the economic relationship between the United States and India has taken a significant turn. But some experts believe that there are potential upsides for India as well. Now let's break down the situation. The key point here is the comparative advantage. While the 27% tariff is significant, it's crucial to consider how it compares to tariffs on India's competitors. Now, the US will implement a 10% base tariff on all countries starting from the 5th of April. with the additional 17% for India kicking in on the 9th of April, totaling 27%. However, this 27% is lower than the tariffs imposed on major competitors like China, Vietnam, Bangladesh, Thailand, and Indonesia. While some developed nations like Japan and the EU have lower tariffs, they don't directly compete with India in many key sectors in terms of exports to the US. Now, this differential could give India a competitive edge, particularly in sectors like textiles and garments, similar to the advantage that Bangladesh once held in the EU. Now, the second potential advantage is the opportunity for negotiation. The Trump administration has indicated that these tariffs could be revised if trade concerns are addressed. India and the US are already negotiating a trade deal, with the first phase targeted for completion by October. Now, this provides a platform for India to mitigate the tariffs' impact. Furthermore, a recent US report highlighted India's relatively high existing tariff rates. Now, in this context, the 27% tariff might be seen as less severe outcome. Finally, the reaction from other trade partners will be crucial. Countries with traditionally lower tariffs might retaliate, leading to a trade war. However, given India's relatively lower tariff compared to its competitors, a strong retaliatory response is less likely. Now, this allows India to focus on securing concessions through negotiations. It remains to be seen what India's approach would be in response to Trump's tariff in the upcoming days. Now, for more on this, we have with us Mitali Nikor, the founder of Nikor Associate and economist, joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you for being with us, Mitali.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show.
Now, what specific sectors of India's economy will be most affected by Trump's tariffs, and how will India adapt to the changes?
So I think there are definitely winners and losers that have been created by today's tariff announcements. I wouldn't classify India as a complete loser in today's tariff announcements. I would say there are some sort of silver linings, as you rightly pointed out. I mean, the first thing is that when we look at, the basket of commodities that India is currently exporting to the US, the 2 or 3 sectors that are most likely to be hit are electronics, semiconductors, high-tech equipment, which is not a very large basket for India at the moment, but it wants these commodities to grow much faster. So I think this is a very important area, especially high-tech equipment and electronics, where India might want to negotiate further with the US. On the other hand, there are commodities like textiles, there are commodities like engineering goods, and then there are commodities like agricultural and food processing, goods as well, where it will be harder to negotiate because it is harder for India to give concessions, especially in agriculture and food processing, because that hits the poorest of the poor. So I do feel going forward, it's really going to be a sector by sector kind of approach and trying to understand which value chains to prioritize when it comes to US exports.
Right. And Mitali, do Trump's tariff policies lead to long-term shifts in India's trade strategy, such as diversifying export markets or even strengthening domestic manufacturing?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the biggest testaments of this is the fact that the Prime Minister Narendra Modi is currently sitting in Bangkok as part of the BIMSTEC summit. Because you can already see that, it is within the interest of the government of India, it is within the interest of the administration to start looking at how can we strengthen regional value chains. And for a very long time, we've been advocating also with, the Ministry of Commerce and, the trade ministries to say, looking at trading with your neighbors, look at trade with the regional players within Asia Pacific. It's very critical. Even the EU delegation was actually in India
Yes.
just about 2 weeks ago, and the EU delegation has been negotiating more concessions with India, and has been looking at how EU based products can be sold more in the Indian market. So even the Indian market and the strength of the Indian economy today provides India with an important bargaining chip, if you will, in international trade negotiations, to say you can have
Mm.
access to our markets as long as we are able to, export more goods to your countries. So I think, there's a lot of
Mm.
opportunities for India that are opened up with this tariff regime.
Right. And how do these tariffs influence India-US diplomatic relations, especially concerning these trade negotiations that'll be coming up and the broader strategic partnerships?
So I think, it's very interesting because it almost feels like the relationship between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump is a sort of separate dynamic which is going on its own path. And it's almost, something which has been characterized even by both leaders as, let's leave our friendship aside. We are friends, but
Mm.
so I do think that there's a very interesting dynamic between the two leaders there. But when you look at the economic issues and when you look at the national issues that are impacting both countries, it is common sense for both countries to work more closely together. India can provide the US with the very necessary skilled workforce, for example, to aid its AI transition. India themselves, I mean, we ourselves need to upskill ourselves in our IT industry, for example, to be able to weather the storm that artificial intelligence is going to bring, and upskill our engineers. It's very critical. And then on top of that, when it comes to space exploration, when it comes to electronics, when it comes to high technology, I mean, these are areas in which India can be a natural partner for the United States. So I do feel that
Yeah.
once this tariff discussion is sort of to one side, it is important for India and the US to continue looking at the North Star of increasing trade between the two countries to $500 billion by 2030.
Right. Natalie, thank you very much for being with us on First Post.
Thank you.
And just when it seemed that TikTok's fate in the US was sealed, Amazon has swooped in with a last-minute bid to buy it. With the Trump administration's ban looming over ByteDance, like a reality show's elimination countdown, the e-commerce giant has thrown its hat into the ring in the hope to claim TikTok as its own. Now, according to reports, Amazon submitted its offer in a letter addressed to Vice President J.D. Vance and to the Commerce Secretary. The bid comes as a last-ditch attempt to prevent TikTok from disappearing from American screens. With the deadline for a sale or an outright ban set for Saturday for the unversed, the ban on TikTok stems from national security concerns, requiring TikTok's Chinese owners to sell the platform to non-Chinese buyers. Now, Amazon's interest in TikTok isn't exactly surprising. The app has become a retail powerhouse, with influencers pushing everything from skincare serums to viral kitchen gadgets. Many creators direct users to Amazon for purchases, earning commissions along the way. In short, TikTok isn't just a social media app. It's a shopping mall disguised as an entertainment platform, and Amazon wants in. This wouldn't be Amazon's first attempt at social media domination. In 2014, Amazon acquired the live streaming platform Twitch and book review site Goodreads in 2013. It even experimented with its own short-form video feed called Inspire. However, it quietly shut down earlier this year. While Amazon's bid is making waves, it's far from the only player in the game. Several companies and investment firms have been eyeing TikTok's US operations. Oracle, the software giant that already provides cloud infrastructure for TikTok, has long been seen as a frontrunner. The investment firm Blackstone venture capital firm Andreessen Horowitz and the American investors have also been exploring deals that could make TikTok an American-owned platform. Now, in January, the AI startup Perplexity AI also made a proposal online, arguing that it could rebuild TikTok's algorithm without creating a tech monopoly. Now, despite all of the interest, ByteDance has remained tight-lipped about whether it actually plans to sell TikTok. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has hinted that he might extend the deadline, hence offering a bit of breathing room for negotiations. But with the clock ticking, the fate of TikTok in the US remains uncertain. And moving on, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is visiting the country's staunchest ally in the European Union, Hungary. Netanyahu landed in the capital city of Budapest early on Thursday. Now, Hungary's long-standing ties with Israel were on display as Prime Minister Viktor Orban welcomed his friend and old ally Netanyahu with military honors. Both the leaders held talks in Budapest. Netanyahu's visit to the EU nation Hungary comes despite an arrest warrant by the International Criminal Court, or the ICC. The ICC had issued a warrant against Netanyahu in November of last year over the allegations of war crimes and crimes against humanity in Israel's war against Gaza. Now, the war began after Hamas attacked Israel on the 7th of October 2023, where over 1,200 people had lost their lives. The ICC stressed that it was Hungary's legal obligation and also responsibility toward other countries to enforce the court's decision. In response, Hungarian Prime Minister Orban not just refused to act upon the arrest, but also announced his country's withdrawal from the ICC. Orban is also the first leader to invite Netanyahu acting against the ICC warrant. The Hungarian Prime Minister is also expected to back his Israeli counterpart on US President Donald Trump's proposal to relocate over 2 million Palestinians from Gaza to neighboring countries such as Egypt and Jordan. Now, the ties between Hungary and Israel have deepened, especially after the onset of the Gaza war. Hungary is also one of Israel's closest allies and supporters in the European Union. Orban has also stated that Hungary will be the safest country in Europe for Jews. In the last few months, Hungary has also hosted several matches of Israel's national football team and clubs. This amid rising anti-Israeli sentiment and tensions in Europe due to its violent actions in Gaza. Not only this, Hungary has also stood against pro-Palestinian protests in the country. Orban and Netanyahu also share a common ally, US President Donald Trump. Both leaders have embraced Trump's policies. Hungarian media also described Orban and Trump as spiritual brothers. And interestingly, Hungarian Prime Minister Orban's biggest ally, Russian President Vladimir Putin, also faces an ICC arrest warrant. Now, earlier, the Russian leader has also ignored the ICC arrest warrant when he visited Mongolia last year. By doing this, the countries are trying to diminish the impact of Premier International Criminal Court and also its major decisions. In fact, Germany's Chancellor in waiting, Friedrich Merz, has also vowed to make sure that Netanyahu can visit the country. Though legally binding for its members, the ICC increasingly seems to be losing its legitimacy. Not just that, it is also exposing the widening deep cracks within the European partners. And that's all we have on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to Firstpost.
From breaking news to the day's biggest controversies, shedding light on the world's top headlines, detailed analysis on the stories that matter the most to you. Catch it all on Spotlight at 6 p.m. India time and 12:30 GMT, only on Firstpost.